like everything in the infinite cosmos, this story does not actually have a beginning, but nothing has a beginning if you really think about it. So you have to choose a beginning. And the beginning that I've chosen for this story, for this account, is the fact that Martholomew Sterling created the Lucid Institute before our planet emerged into this universe. Actually, before our galaxy emerged, and really, Martholomew Sterling created the Lucid Institute before this universe came into existence. And of course, this universe is one out of an infinite number of universes that preceded our own and that coexist with our own. Now, in our solar system, before multicellular organisms came into being, single cellular organisms performed Lucid Institute experiments by themselves, on themselves, for themselves, with themselves. For example, single cellular organisms would do these weird experiments, supposedly, where they would pretend, or they would transform into such a form that they would no longer recognize themselves. And so, they would perform Lucid Institute experiments in isolated ways. And it's kind of interesting because the reason that multicellular organisms actually came into being is because of Lucid Institute experiments. Because since the single cells would deliberately confuse themselves and transform in a way where they would no longer recognize themselves, they would mistake themselves for each other, and they suddenly would form these interdependent identities, right? And that is the birth of multicellular organisms, actually. And so, once these multicellular organisms banded together, of course, they appreciated the practical collaborations that could emerge, that would allow them to survive and thrive in ways that they couldn't by themselves. But also, they realized, oh my God, it's way more fun to do Lucid Institute experiments, together, as collectives. And God only knows how many types of Lucid Institute experiments these multicellular organisms would do together. Some of the ones that I've heard of, number one, they would create structures together, and these structures would be modeled after what they perceive to be the structure of the entire cosmos. Now, of course, nobody actually knows exactly what the structure of the entire cosmos is, if it even has a structure, but their perception, their theory, their model of the entire cosmos, they would try to replicate that and create structures to be similar to that. That's one thing that I've heard. Another thing is that they would generate vibrational frequencies of some sort that would put them into altered states together, right? Thirdly, I know, or at least heard from Martholomew, that they would. Sorry, what did Martholomew tell me?
It was eons ago.
His words are like piercing to the brain in a way that kind of like paralyzes the brain a little bit. So yeah, they would. Okay, duh. The third thing. The third thing they did was God. They created what we know of as humor. They invented humor, right? So they invented humor. And their theory of humor was that it was somewhere in between a drug and love. Not sure if that's true, but that's what they say. So, in addition, by extension, there are three primary theories about certain aspects of the origin of the Lucid Institute, especially in relationship to Martholomew Sterling, right? First theory is that the first single-celled organism that performed a Lucid Institute experiment was Martholomew Sterling. The second is that once they joined together and they started doing Lucid Institute experiments together, some theorists say that the first experiment that they did together was called Martholomew Sterling. The third theory is that once they joined together, they named the entire cosmos Martholomew Sterling because they perceived the cosmos functioning, operating, behaving like one big Lucid Institute experiment, or like an initiator of Lucid Institute experiments for infinity and beyond, you know? So those are the three primary theories of some of the aspects of the origins of the Lucid Institute, especially in relationship to Martholomew Sterling. I will touch on the one that I think that might be the most valid a little bit later. But so regardless of which of these theories is correct, nobody really knows, right? But regardless of which one is correct, these esoteric theorists generally agree that in every region of the infinite cosmos and at every point in history, the Lucid Institute emerges as an inevitable and inescapable habit of reality, as a way to not ever completely fall asleep. Basically, that's kind of the idea. So it's an inevitable habit of reality itself to not fully fall asleep, to preserve a sense of play, and to cultivate novelty through absurd and meaningful experimentation, as well as essentially to re-enchant the disenchanted world over and over again. Because as we know, the world is easily disenchanted, right? It needs re-enchantment, and that's the purpose of the Lucid Institute. So, not only that, most of these esoteric theorists, and I've hung out with some of them. Some of them are really wacky, some of them are cool, some of them are sober-minded, some of them do way too many drugs. But another thing that the esoteric theorists generally agree on is that Martholomew Sterling has been gathering data, gathering letters, gathering documents, gathering manifestos, gathering objects, gathering anything he can get his hands on. He, she, they, it. Nobody really knows exactly how to identify Martholomew Sterling, but so this being has been gathering everything he could possibly gather related to the Lucid Institute for trillions, billions, billions, an infinite number of years, right? And so the theorists that I'm familiar with, at least, they say that it's more likely, of course, that the archive, the database, let's say, is not a physical place where Martholomew stores these things, but it's actually a metaphysical space, and I can vouch for that because I've actually fucking been there. So, I'm gonna tell you more about that because it's pretty incredible. But so basically, as I was wandering around what I like to call either the liminal space or really the imaginalverse. That's what I call it. When I was wandering around the imaginalverse one time, years ago, right? Wandering around the imaginalverse, I stumbled upon this crazy temple in a forest of some sort, and it happened to be the Lucid Institute temple. So what's cool is that literally anybody can access this place, go to this place in the imaginalverse if they are willing and able to vividly envision what it looks like. So let me just tell you a little bit about what it looks like in case you want to go there right now if you want. Really, maybe not the best time, but sure, you can if you want, later, whatever. Anytime you want for the rest of your life. So it's in the forest. It's in a very thick forest, and the temple is so the base is rectangular brick, basically, if you can picture that. So the base is rectangular and it's made of brick, and the top is spherical, and the top is made of glass. So when you're inside of it, you can see the sky. What's kind of one crazy thing about the temple is that It's literally infinite. It's like infinitely expanding, like the universe itself, which is kind of crazy, because there's always stuff being added to it. So it's kind of like you can't really ever. It's always getting bigger. It's pretty weird. But so when I you know, one thing you'll witness if you can, you know how like in a dream you can kind of like fly sometimes or float sometimes or whatever. In that imaginal verse, if you're in the right state of mind or the right state of being, so to speak, you can float pretty easily. So the temple like has these massive doors, really tall doors, and above the doors there's 3 inscriptions, kind of like the Temple of Apollo in Delphi. You know, you may have heard of that. The inscriptions above the temple, above the doors of the temple, say, "The mind is an unfixed eye." That's the first inscription. The second inscription is, "The heart is the philosopher's stone." And the third inscription is, "The soul is infinite." And again, it's like hard to see those unless you kind of float, or if you're like really tall or something. Or if you're like really good at climbing, you can climb the really tall doors and see it. But so when you go inside the temple, like it's like kind of hard to describe because none of us have really been in infinite space. I mean, you could say the cosmos, the universe, but we're in infinity all the time. But it's like, but to actually go into a temple that's somehow infinite is pretty weird, you know. So it's a little hard to articulate, hard to put into words. Just like when you're in the Grand Canyon, it's hard to take a picture. It's hard to even like look and take in the whole Grand Canyon at once. It's kind of like that. So, but to try to, you know, put it into words as best as possible here. When you go into the temple, it's infinite, as I said, and specifically, it's basically a library. One aspect is that it's a library. It's a library that's full of documents, manifestos, letters, any written document that is at all related to the Lucid Institute is in this temple. And all of those documents are actually categorized chronologically and by galaxy and by planet. So, I mean, it's like super organized actually, which is pretty cool. By the way, the only reason I know anything about the Lucid Institute, of course, is because I found the damn temple. Like, who knows about that? Who knows about it unless they, you know, get lucky enough to somehow like brush shoulders with the Lucid Institute, so to speak. So yeah, that's the only reason I know anything about it. And so I found this place. I went in there. I not only was lucky enough to find the temple, I was lucky enough to meet Martholomew Sterling at the temple. He was there. It was crazy, and not, you know, I haven't just met him one time. I've hung out with him a bunch of times. But yeah, so I was struck by the magnitude and the beauty and the brilliance and the aesthetically, you know, orgasmic, you could say, you know, quality of this, of the external and internal aspects of this temple. But yeah, so I quickly realized that I was in the presence of Martholomew Sterling, even though I didn't know anything about him at the time. He had to introduce himself and tell me all about all this stuff. And so he showed me a bunch of documents. He showed me all sorts of wacky shit in the temple. But one thing that's kind of interesting is, you know, one of many things, is that not only did he show me written documents, but, you know, intelligent creatures from all over the cosmos have created things. They don't have to be written. You know, creatures that aren't even literate can be part of the Lucid Institute, of course. And so he showed me objects, tons of objects, right? I could go in, I don't want to list them all because it's going to take too long. I'll just try to remember one. The one that stands out the most, the one that resonated, I don't know exactly why, but basically he showed me the closest thing I can compare it to was, it was like a bird nest, right? But it was something like a bird. It was created by something like a bird from another planet, you know? And it was something akin to a bird nest. And he went on this rant and he was telling me how, like, you know, intelligent creatures from different planets, from different galaxies, and all that, they, even if they don't consciously know that they're part of the Lucid Institute, he considers them part of the Lucid Institute based on the type of behavior they have and the type of stuff that they create. If they create something like a bird nest that is particularly striking, unique, novel, weird, bizarre, then he'll loop it into the Lucid Institute based on his own criteria, essentially. Another thing that these esoteric scholars, these theorists, agree on is that basically over time certain initiation rituals have been created, right? And this is one of the first things I became familiar with, and one of the first things I started practicing, because it was like a good, practical, practicable, actionable way to like carry on the spirit of the Lucid Institute. So the three kind of primary rituals are, number one, to what is it?
To bow?
Not quite.
Oh.
So create your own name. Create your own name. That's number one. Create your own name. Beautiful thing. Beautiful, empowering ritual. That's number one. Number two is to create your own creation myth.
Oh.
And number three is to create your own piece of communication. Again, you don't have to write it. You can be creative. You can think outside the box. That's what Martholomew Sterling wants us all to do in the first place. Create your own piece of communication that you leave in public for a stranger to find. And the whole idea is that you leave it for a stranger in a place that you might want to find such a thing, and content that you might that you would be excited to find, and something that makes the receiver feel like it's a synchronicity of some sort. That it's like, that they feel like, oh my God, am I dreaming? Basically, am I somehow waking up in a lucid dream that is the mundane world? So I wanted to say that since the temple, just before I move forward, since the temple is my favorite place I've ever been, right? I want to say that inside the temple, not only are there all the documents that I mentioned, and not only are they infinite, and there's Mr. Larry. He's a longtime member of the Lucid Institute.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so not only are there practitioners in the Lucid Institute, passers-by in the Lucid Institute, there are experiment rooms, there are meditation halls, there are chapels, there are pews, there are rivers, there are streams, there are waterfalls, there are flowers, there are succulents. There are programs. There are many programs in this temple, and one of the programs that I was particularly interested in is that there's a program that, through some form of telepathy that I'm still trying to understand. Martholomew Sterling sometimes won't give me all the details about stuff like that. He wants me to find out for myself, and thank God, But so there's a program where you can basically get a language installed into your consciousness through some sort of telepathy automatically, And so there's like people there that are learning all these different languages like on the spot through some sort of telepathy, which is pretty crazy. And again, I don't understand all the mechanics of it. There are tea houses. There's like rooms full of these crazy notebooks, and I love notebooks. Like I love notebooks. I love awesome notebooks. Yeah, so there's these really cool notebooks that are way cooler than this, by the way. Like way cooler. Whoa. This cooler. This cooler. This notebook doesn't even actually compare to any of the notebooks I saw there. Wow. Just next level notebooks. And so in the room with the infinite number of notebooks, Larry, you should go there. You would totally enjoy it. So yeah, exactly. I know you would particularly love the notebook room. So there's a notebook room, an infinite notebook room that seems to constantly be expanding. And you can go in there and you can choose a notebook for free. Money is not a issue there, of course. You just pick whatever you want, read it, take it. They have like backups of everything. You can take it with you, whatever. You can sit in this like beautiful furniture and just like read documents, fill out notebooks, whatever you want to do, So there's a bunch of artistic rooms as well. There's clay, there's wood, there's stone, every artistic type of material you could imagine, every scientific tool you could imagine. There's telescopes, there's microscopes, there's Tesla coils, there's sundials, there's psychoactive plants. Maybe I mentioned that. I'm sorry if I did, but either way, worth repeating. Yeah. There's tons of psychoactive plants. It's pretty wild. So there's a lot of that. There's geometrically arresting. That's the phrase that this is the way he described it. He said there's geometrically arresting succulence. And I totally agree with that. And so, you know, the documents that you might read on a beautiful piece of furniture there, it's like they're documents from beings that you would never have met otherwise, of course. I mean, sometimes it's from the far reaches from another part in the cosmos that you have no clue about, right? So there's that. Now, is everybody following a little bit?
No.
Yeah.
Ish?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Okay.
This is,
Yeah. It's pretty weird stuff, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
it's
a crazy thing that people don't know about. I'm trying to make people more aware because it's definitely worth knowing about, obviously. as you
Yeah.
can see.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, basically, now we've covered some. I mean, I've just obviously scratched the surface of the intricacies of the temple, right? That might be Martholomew. We're doing this. I appreciate that. He's like very watchful. He studied mindfulness for God knows how long. But yeah, so, you know, I've touched the surface. I've only touched the surface on the temple, but let me move forward. So, you know, since planet Earth is our beautiful, intimate home, I want to say a little bit more about some of the, you know, just little tidbits, basically Lucid Institute trivia, so you could say, about our beautiful home here, right? The pale blue dot, as who said that?
Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan, obviously part of the Lucid Institute. So yeah. So in terms of the Lucid Institute's presence on Earth, so one of the oldest tablets that was found in ancient Mesopotamia. Now this was around 2140 BCE, right? Around 2140 BCE, one of the first tablets in ancient Mesopotamia, these esoteric scholars claim that Martholomew Sterling actually himself etched a picture of himself with the Euphrates River blasting out of his eye sockets. That's one weird theory. Not sure if that's completely true. Again, Martholomew won't confirm these things or deny them, of course. Another thing is that, you know, some of these scholars that have been chasing the history of the Lucid Institute, they say that the Great Sphinx in ancient Egypt is actually modeled after Martholomew Sterling, especially because, and again, this is all just like rumor, hearsay, you know, like whatever, like, but they say that sightings of Martholomew Sterling in ancient Egypt suggest that he actually was half lion, half human, at that time at least. You know, he's reiterated himself in so many different ways, it's hard to keep track. Now, so, you know, again, like he tells me about these things. I gather information from other sources sometimes, especially in the temple, and sometimes he confirms, sometimes he tells me explicitly, sometimes not. But one thing he has said, he gave me a list of like historical figures that he said were definitely part of the Lucid Institute, and I was super fascinated because I love history, I love like historical figures and stuff. I could give you that list, but that would take too much time. I'll give you a few names that stand out, you know. So he said that Pythagoras was definitely part of the Lucid Institute. He said that Buddha himself was part of the Lucid Institute. He said that Shakespeare, oddly, maybe not even oddly enough, it makes sense, right? Shakespeare was part of the Lucid Institute. And any guesses? A female literary... Well,
Gertrude?
maybe. I haven't heard about that one.
Gertrude
Dickinson?
Stein.
Gertrude Stein is actually correct. Gertrude Stein.
You got it.
Like, you know, which makes
I just serve a
complete
drink.
sense. You know, it's like pretty undeniable that Gertrude Stein was part of it. And so he told me that, and I wanted to mention that. He said that he actually said that the Lucid Institute has been named has been called an infinite number of names throughout history. And it's only actually the 21st century that it's explicitly been called the Lucid Institute. And of course, I haven't known about it since the last few years. So that's the only name I've known. I wish I knew the other ones. If I do hear about it, I'll give you the list. But for now, it's the Lucid Institute. And basically, he's instructed me, and I took the call. you know, of course I wasn't forced to take the call. I could have just been like, fuck, you know, forget you, like, screw you. But I mean, he's a pretty charming individual. He captivated my attention, and he was like, dude, you should be an ambassador for the Lucid Institute. You should spread letters all around Los Angeles and anywhere that you travel, anywhere that you go, and encourage other people in a playful way to do the same if they feel compelled. And basically, the way he described these letters or these pieces of communication, including this talk, really, is transmissions to anyone. I'm reading words directly from him. He said, transmissions to anyone who recognizes, this phrasing gets a little weird, but I want to be correct. Transmissions to anyone who recognizes a sacred beauty behind and on the surface of every depth of design and feeling that points to interdependence instead of mechanical self-isolation. Whoa. It's a mouthful, but I dig what he's getting at. And so that's one thing I wanted to read like verbatim. I didn't want to get that wrong. Now I do want to say that when the material world becomes quantumly sophisticated enough, or maybe more precisely, when our behavior and our technology and our developments start matching the sophistication that already exists in the quantum verse, so to speak, then the temple that I told you about is actually going to have a material counterpart in the material world. You can knock on the damn temple, you know what I mean? Like in this waking world. And not only that, which is cool by itself, and not only like the physical material temple is also going to be infinitely expanding, which is pretty wild. We can't really imagine that, but it's true, apparently. But not only that, the material version of the temple will actually simultaneously exist in multiple places at once. Hopefully that makes sense. Like, so yeah, it's going to exist like in multiple, maybe an infinite, well, not infinite per se in the physical world, but like on Earth, there's going to be many simultaneous physical occurrences of that temple that you can walk into and knock on. You could like bang your head against the door and like bleed if you wanted to. Like that's how real it is, you know? And so that's something I wanted to make sure to mention. And Martholomew gives a date on that. Very precise. He didn't say it was like vague or anything. He said there's a specific day, or well, maybe not, yeah, a specific year at the very least. A specific year when that material temple, simultaneous material temple will manifest. Any guesses?
2023.
Not quite.
2023.
Just a random guess.
20. It's yeah. It feels a little far off, but I mean he's pretty
within our
confident.
lifetimes.
He said 2177.
Damn.
He said 2177. And
Didn't make the cut, sorry.
so for now, it's May 27th, 2023, and as I said, I am an ambassador and a practitioner of the Lucid Institute. Happily so, joyfully so, ecstatically so, you could even say. And you know, I do want to say that like, if you feel compelled, you can create your own name, of course. You can create your own mythology, of course. And you can create a piece of communication to leave to a stranger in public. Why not? It's fun to do that.
Yeah.
And even, you know, you can keep it private. You don't have to tell anybody about it. Or you can not do it at all, and that's totally fine. So that's one thing he wanted to make sure to say. And, you know, for all we know, the crazy thing, one thing I realized as I was kind of transmitting this from him and, you know, putting this together, is that for all we know, each of us, or at least some of us, maybe all of us, maybe one of us, maybe two, maybe three, have participated in the Lucid Institute or the previous incarnations of the Lucid Institute an infinite number of times before. You know, like perhaps, and so we may have participated in this initiation, in this weird movement an infinite number of times before, in an infinite number of lifetimes, in an infinite number of life forms or universes. It's hard to say. Now, not only that, maybe each of us has been Martholomew Sterling at one point or another. And maybe, actually, maybe all of us are Martholomew Sterling right now. We really, I mean, it's really hard to say. And another thing is that perhaps our planet Earth, was designed as a Lucid Institute experiment, and maybe every single galaxy was designed as a Lucid Institute experiment. Maybe every word in every language was designed as a Lucid Institute experiment. Maybe every single subatomic particle was designed as a Lucid Institute experiment. I mean, it's more likely than not, really, that that's true. And so I'm wrapping up here. I know it's been a long journey.
It's good.
I wanted to make sure to mention this. The reason that Martholomew Sterling has instructed me to give this talk at this particular location, right, is because that statue over there, you can't really see it very well, it's getting dark, but maybe you've seen it before, you can walk over there and look at it afterwards. There's a statue over there that's been here since the 1930s. That statue, it's a beautiful statue, and it's commonly known as either the Lady of the Lake or the Queen of the Angels. Those are the two primary. Queen of the Angels.
Oh, yeah.
So it's either the Queen of the Angels, the Lady of the Lake, and you know, there's some pretty interesting. Of course, there's some interesting history related to the Lucid Institute here. That's the reason why we're doing it. Now, that statue. So okay. 1934. Let's go back to 1934, right? 1934, FDR. We're familiar with this guy, right?
Yeah.
Pretty interesting fellow. FDR in 1934. Now, let me say, let me just make this clear. FDR, when he was growing up in New York, he would go to the Lucid Institute, or what was then the Lucid Institute, whatever name they were going by at that time, right? He would go to meetings, these Lucid Institute meetings, and he would have like these alcohol infused, God knows what else they were doing, maybe other drugs, I don't know, but at least alcohol. So fairly drunken state that FDR and Martholomew Sterling would be in late night, up in, until the sun came up. Probably smoking joints, Larry, and so. Yeah, they were under the influence of something, and they would talk about all sorts of stuff, And Martholomew Sterling, maybe he's lying about this. He is a trickster, but he's told me that the reason that FDR decided to create the Federal Public Works of Art project. I'm not sure if you guys know about that. One of the coolest things the U.S. government has ever done, in my opinion, created the Federal Public Works of Art project in the 1930s, and so FDR would not have created that without the Lucid Institute. That's my point. He would not have created that if not for the alcohol and joint infused nights with Martholomew Sterling talking about God knows what, philosophy, politics, embodiment, mysticism, spirituality, tricksterism, all that stuff, And so they would have these talks, and he decided to create this thing. And so the woman who created that statue, again, it was put there in the 1930s, the original one. There's a lot of history. There was a lot of graffiti that got put on it. It got taken down, and then it got like polished back up or whatever with some graffiti-proof paint or something like that, and then put back there in the 1980s. But the woman who created that statue, her name is Ada Mae Sharpless. She was actually funded by this program. There were thousands of artists. For real. In the 1930s, there were thousands of artists that were funded by that program, and she was one of them in Southern California. And so she created that, and not only was FDR inspired by the Lucid Institute and Martholomew Sterling to create that program, of course, Ada was also part. She's a close friend of Martholomew's, and she was part of the Lucid Institute as well. And she actually created that statue, that sculpture, as a way to memorialize or symbolize her. What's that now?
I heard they were lovers.
That is one theory.
I've heard the
That is one
same,
theory.
actually, but they keep denying it for some reason. Maybe TMC has like the truth about it.
I mean, it's more than likely that they were. It seems like it from what I've heard. Yeah, for sure. That's the most, dominant theory for sure.
I've heard they're the same person too.
Well, that's one.
They
That's a little
became the
bit
same.
more
Yeah.
like on the conspiratorial side. Or
Yeah.
whatever, but yeah, she created that sculpture as a way, apparently, to symbolize the two main principles that she actually contributed explicitly to the Lucid Institute. The two principles that she contributed were courage and non-violent resistance. And if you look at the statue, decipher it for yourself, but it does kind of represent that, you could say. And so after her passing in 1988, so she passed in 1988, 2 years after my birth, she passed in 1988, and since then, she has been known to be seen wandering the halls of the Lucid Institute Temple, of course, right? So she wanders the halls, she does all sorts of, who knows what she's doing there, but definitely like very active. And so one thing that's pretty fascinating is that she told Martholomew Sterling to tell me, to tell you, right, that she wants to celebrate and honor this man right here. Raymond Singh.
Raymond.
But not just for no reason, not just because he's a great individual as he is, which he is.
Yes,
But she was particularly struck by the notion that Raymond has expressed, which is that dialogue is a form of non-violent resistance. Now, yes, and so she wanted to make sure that all of us involved here tonight were made lucidly aware that is one form of many of nonviolent resistance. And so she also wanted to tell us that, the Queen of the Angels, this is verbatim from her, so I don't want to get it wrong. She says that the Queen of the Angels blesses us tonight and forever with the power to see possibility where there was hollowness, beauty in overlooked minutia, magic in natural creativity, a fire in absurdity, and an open heart in each other's eyes. So that's words from her. She's a sweetheart, obviously, you can tell. And, lastly, I just wanted to say, who knows, because perhaps this Salon 17 event has happened an infinite number of times before, and, whether it has or not, these are the types of questions that Martholomew refuses to tell me the answers to. And thank God, because without mystery there is no novelty, you could say. You could argue that, and that's my stance. And thank goodness, because Martholomew is filled with mystery and filled with novelty, and he encourages us to allow those states to unfold within our lives individually and collectively. And he wanted me to say, hallelujah, forever, amen.
Woo!